Dwayne didn't have the whole layout of everything perfectly aligned, all the contact at every point.
When I got down there to the mountains, I kept the helicopter in the mountains there for the first while, because that's the only, I didn't have any property or know anyone or anything.
No hangar, nothing.
Anyway.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I want to greet you from the Philippines. I don't know what time it is where you are, but if it's morning, evening, or afternoon, or night, we want to say greetings from the Philippines. Today I have with me, I would say this is a long-awaited video interview that I've always wanted to do. In multiple videos I've mentioned that I'm learning a lot from this individual. The journey of faith is so amazing. Well, guess what? Today you will hear for yourself firsthand what is the experience like journeying throughout the Philippines. So I want to welcome with me here our beloved director of Philippines Adventist Medical Aviation Services. Welcome, and you can tell us your name and where you're from.
Well, my name is Dwayne Harris. I'm originally from Montana in the U.S. and I've been here about a little over 14 years.
Wow. So, guys, 14 years. I can tell you no. There's no way we can put your story 14 years in a one-shot video, but we're going to make it concise for you. So tell us, like, what was life like growing up in the U.S.? What is your childhood and upbringing, etc.?
Well, I grew up on a ranch in Montana. I consider myself very blessed to have the upbringing I had, and that I, grew up out working outside with my dad and learned a lot of things, mechanics, building, just a lot of different things growing up, and that has all become very useful to me in my last 14 years that I've been working over here.
Okay, and that's good.
So yeah, I went through college and started into flying there. I had gotten into rodeo for a time and firefighting kind of during the summers between college and stuff, but I ended up going to a 2-year technical school in Montana where I got my mechanics license, and during that time I had, when I started school there, I'd bought a Mooney that had been damaged in an airplane, and I rebuilt it while I was going to school. So by the time I finished school, I had a flying airplane, and during that time I had joined a flying club that was on the field and had gotten my instrument commercial ratings for airplanes. And across the field from the school there was a National Guard aviation unit that flew helicopters, and that had kind of caught my attention, and I had talked with them and ended up joining the National Guard right as I finished A&P school, and they sent me to flight school to fly helicopters. And yeah, so I was enjoying that. I had everything I wanted, and but I wasn't giving God the priorities in my life like I should have been at that time.
Oh yeah. So did you grow up Christian? Was it a Christian household growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian Adventist home, and went through primarily Christian education growing up, but I had never really made that personal connection with the Lord that is so vital in our walk, our Christian walk.
Oh, okay, good. So you're growing up in a Christian home, you get all these opportunities, A&P school, your own little airplane, then you started venturing with the helicopter. When you got into the whole flying, how far did you go being in the U.S. with your flying experiences and training?
Well, like I had mentioned, I had my commercial airplane ratings when I went to flight school for the Army there for the National Guard. And then I learned to fly helicopters there. I ended up getting trained into the Blackhawks. I was in a medevac unit there in Montana, and was starting to get into spraying, like aerial crop dusting with airplanes there shortly before I came over to the Philippines. So I didn't have an extensive amount of experience, as far as flying commercially, but I did a lot of different types of flying.
Oh, okay, good. So you're there, that's your life growing up, have that Christian background, but you're not feeling necessarily connected. What was like the beginning or turning point for you where you're doing that Black Hawk, National Guard, but somehow did you start feeling like an emptiness or a lack?
Well, not really. I was enjoying what I was doing, but God had been working in different ways, subtly, through my interactions with various people over the previous year or two. But what really kind of got my attention and focus changed to God's priorities was losing everything in a house fire. And I was living with my parents at the time in a log house my dad had built, and it was about a week before Christmas. And something started the house on fire, probably related to the wood burning stove that was in the house. It was during the day, no one was home, so no one was, no person was harmed, but it consumed everything. Very hot fire. I had a pickup truck sitting out in front about 30 feet from the house, and it was so hot it bubbled up that plastic and the safety glass between the panes and the pickup, and melted the grill and stuff that was plastic on it. So
that was hot.
But it consumed everything that was in the house.
Right. So the fire took place. Everything is now up in flames. What happened next? Where did you go from that point?
Well, it made me step back and kind of considering priorities in life, and I was into a lot of different, hobbies and stuff, and I realized, I've been working, seeking my own desires and ambitions, and, buying all this stuff, investing in all these things, and they're just gone overnight. And, ultimately, what's the purpose of those? And in terms of eternity, there is no purpose in them. If anything, sometimes those things can be harmful because they take away from, time and money that you might be investing in, in God's purposes. But kind of realize, ultimately the only thing we're going to take to heaven with us is our own souls, and those of others we might have been influential in leading to the Lord. And so decided, I want to use my life to make an eternal impact, not just to do whatever I want to do on this earth.
Okay. So at this point now, your focus has changed. You are reanalyzing your life, etc. What are some of the events that now led to you having a sense of direction into ministry and missionary work?
Well, I had been interested in mission flying since I was young, but, some of it was out of a desire to serve God, but a lot of it, I think, was just out of my sense of adventure. And, but, God can use some of those things even if they're misdirected sometimes. But I had been in contact with a individual that was involved in mission aviation in different places, and he had seen the need for helicopters in ministry in the Philippines, just because you get back into the mountain areas and the terrain is so rugged, there's no place you can even put airstrips. So in order to support some of the mission work that's going on, the only option would be a helicopter, either that or you're on foot hiking. So he had expressed that need to me, and that he was looking for someone that would be willing to go over and try to develop a ministry with helicopters. And
Okay.
the timing of everything was, I think, divine providence, and that I was out in Ohio at the time when our house burned down visiting someone, and I had arranged to meet up with David, the guy that was in missions, in Kentucky, which was kind of halfway between where him and I were. So I was flying my little Mooney around, and so I had arranged to go down and meet him and, visit with him and see, what all he was thinking. And so it was the night before I was going to go down and talk with him that my sister had called me and said our house had burned down. So that next morning when I went down and was visiting with him, about his thoughts and stuff and the needs for helicopter ministry, I said, well, it looks like God's removed most of my material distractions in life, and if he opens some other doors in order for me to be able to go to the Philippines, I'm willing to go over there.
So what were some of the, so you've met up with this aviator who is into ministry, etc. He's presented to your needs. Did you have any challenge that would have hindered you or delayed your willingness to go venture out into mission aviation overseas?
Well, the one main obstacle to that was I was still in the National Guard and committed to them for another 4 or 5 years. When they send you to flight school, you incur a 6-year commitment because of that investment they've made, in training you. And so, I'd only been back from flight school not that long, about a year and a half or 2 years. And so I still owed him a fair bit of time, and I didn't have any idea, if it would be possible to get that deferred or do something, to enable me to go to the Philippines. But I just said, if the Lord opens the doors, I'm willing to go.
Okay. So you decided you're gonna go, and did you test the waters first? Because I know a lot of times persons in North America, they're open to mission work, but they don't just throw themselves out there. They kind of do a little pre-run, a little testing, a visitation, and check it out. Was it the same for you?
Well, I had been encouraged by David to go over to the Philippines and do a survey trip for a week. But I was still, in the Guard, committed, and I didn't have any idea when that might be able to happen. But I thought, well, I'll just take a step of faith, and just so I make sure I can't back out of it, I went and bought a ticket 3 months beforehand, and for a time when I thought, I'd have time to go over there. So I did that, but God was working, on my heart and stuff at that time, and as I, for the first time in my life was reading and studying every morning, praying and seeking the Lord's guidance in my life, I started to be able to hear and discern, His voice and His will, through God's Word, and different things that were God's providence was opening for me. And I started to get convicted that I shouldn't be compromising the Sabbath as I had been. So in the National Guard, you have to go to drill weekends, 1 weekend a month. So that's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I, of course, for the last 4 or 5 years that I'd been in, I had been doing that without any problem. But I started to get, convicted that I shouldn't be compromising the Sabbath as I had been. And so I requested to have Sabbaths off from my company commander, from that one drill weekend a month. And I thought, I don't see why this should be a big deal for them, because, as a pilot, I had to go in during the week, intermittently and fly anyway. And, I had a flexible schedule. I was helping my parents on the ranch part of the time and doing some other things, but I could prioritize whatever I needed to, according to the needs of my schedule. So I told them that, and they weren't willing to work with me at all in accommodating that request. And I appealed it clear up to the general of the state of Montana for the National Guard, and didn't make any difference, didn't change anything. They removed me from, their flying status until things were remedied, until the situation was fixed. And so I tried different avenues, to see if I could get some backing, from the church and stuff, but nothing made any difference. And so finally it came down to a drill weekend. I was there on Friday, and I told my company commander before I left there on Friday, I said, I'm not gonna be in tomorrow. And he said, well, I can't give you an excused absence. And I said, well, you do what you need to do, and I'm going to do what I need to do. So at that point, I quit coming to drills on Saturday, and they weren't sure what to do. I don't think they'd ever dealt with anything like it before, and I had up to that point a pretty flawless military record, and so there wasn't any basis on my insubordination in the past. Right. So that went on for several months, where I just didn't come on the Sabbath to the guard drill. And finally my company commander called me and said he'd been discussing the situation with my battalion commander, and they decided they didn't want to waste any time or resources pursuing any negative action towards me, so they were just going to give me an honorable discharge.
Wow.
So I felt that was obviously God's divine intervention in my behalf, because they had threatened me with various things, when this started, like paying back the cost of flight school or even jail time.
Wow.
And at the time I was like, Lord, I don't know where you want me to be, what lessons you want me to learn from this, but if you get me out of this, I'll go to the Philippines. If not, if you want me to sit in jail, I'll sit in jail or whatever.
Right.
So God clearly interceded in my behalf, and shortly thereafter, it was within a month of that call from my company commander telling me that, that I made that first trip to the Philippines. And so yeah, that was remarkable experience in itself.
Oh yeah, so basically the Lord stepped in, miraculously got you out of the military, so now you're seeing step by step He is opening doors and opportunities for you to go into the mission field. Now, you could have gone to various places and so on, but why the Philippines? I know the opportunity came where you talked to your friend David and he suggested, but did you have other options outside of the Philippines to potentially go?
Well, there's needs in mission aviation a lot of places, but with helicopters, there's very few. There's been getting more through some of the different mission organizations like New Tribes and stuff, but at that time, you basically had to create your own opportunity if it was with helicopters specifically.
Oh, okay.
So there was the need that I had been made aware of, and I had the ability with the helicopter experience to do that. So I thought this is
most feasible place to come.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So how did you know you came for the survey trip? What was that like when you visited and trying to feel out the territory?
Well, when I came over here the first time, I had only one contact in the whole country and really had no idea what I was going to do. I thought, well, Lord, you're just going to have to show me what to do, because I'll go around and see what I can learn about aviation over there, but beyond that, I don't know. Anyway, so I arrived, and the contact met me at the airport, And I was talking with him, and he, was asking me what I was, going to try to accomplish. And he said, well, I know someone that's in Palawan that's, involved in mission aviation. If you want to talk to him, maybe you can get some ideas. So he had his number, and so I called him and talked to him a little bit, and he invited me to come down there, which I did, and spent a few days down there with him, and then he was flying back up to Manila to import an engine for an airplane they had that they were needing to change the engine on. And so I came back up to Manila with him, and he kind of, showed me around and shared with me various things about Filipino culture and working with the government and stuff, and introduced me to some other mission groups like Philippine Frontier Missions. They have various projects, in mountainous, remote areas, and they invited me to go out with one of their missionary supervisors to visit some projects, which I did. And then the last day or two before my flight back, I helped pull the engine on that other airplane that they were wanting to swap the engine out on. So I had no idea when I was headed over what I was going to do, but it's like that whole time was completely filled up, It's like God had it planned out, even though I had no idea how it was going to work to start with.
Wow. So you came, you did the survey, and then you went back. How much did you decide you're going to put into it in terms of you lost everything in the fire, but I'm sure you had a little stuff left. When you went back to the US and then you decide you're going to come back and pioneer something, how much of the American dream and life did you give up to pursue this missionary life in the Philippines?
Well, I thought what I wanted to test God. Like, one of my favorite passages in Matthew 6, the last half of it, he's talking about, Jesus is saying, do not worry about, your basic needs, your food, your clothes. For everyone worries about these things, but your Father in heaven knows what you need. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So I thought, okay, Lord, you've promised this if we're seeking first your kingdom, that you're going to provide everything we need.
Right.
I want to see you do this. So it was actually shortly after I got back from that survey trip that I got word that there was some people that were willing to buy this small helicopter, a Hughes 269. And so I said, yeah, sure, go ahead and do that, and we'll go see what we can do with it. And so we spent a little bit of time working on it and getting it ready to go. And I, at the time, had, a fairly nice motorcycle, street bike, and a car, and a pickup, and an airplane.
Wow.
And so I sold my car and motorcycle and my pickup, and I was trying to sell my airplane. It ended up being several years later before I was able to get rid of that. But I had experienced actually so much freedom after that house fire. It's remarkable when you really don't own anything. It's like, it's freeing. I don't think people realize, how much of a burden possessions are. And it's not like it has to be that way, but if we're considering them our own, our stuff, it's a burden. If there are things that we need to use and need to have, for God's service, then, it's not an issue. But so I wanted to just get rid of everything, and everything I own that I still had, I had some tools and stuff that I brought over with me over here, but I wanted to surrender everything to the Lord, and then if, I lost stuff, then I didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't mine to start with. So
nice. So tell me a little more about this particular helicopter versus the Black Hawk from the military? Like, what was the transition for you like?
Well, when they told me about this, I was actually thinking it was a little bit of a later model, the 300, Schweitzer 300, which is about the same size, but it's a little more powerful, a little better performance. But this one was a 1961 model, like serial number 0019, so, you know, early production of this thing. And so it was, you know, didn't have a lot of power, wasn't real fast, but, you know, you could carry about 600 pounds useful load with it. But the big helicopters are actually easier to fly in that they have what they call stability augmentation systems on them that kind of, you know, automatically control some of your stability. But this one, you had to manually control your throttle all the time, so you're having to adjust, you know, depending on the power you're pulling, you're rolling in more throttle or rolling it off. So yeah, it took a little bit of adjustment and to get used to it and get the feel for it for sure. It's quite a bit different than the big ones.
Did anyone help you with that? Like, you're coming over, here's a helicopter that a family is putting together. Was anyone else instrumental in helping you?
Well, I had a cousin of mine, had just finished his private helicopter license and was working with me on this and wanted to come over here and work with me. And so we were kind of working on it together. We did some upgrades and stuff on it, and, you know, kind of flew together. And he was actually better at it initially to start with, just because he was used to flying little small helicopters where I wasn't. So, but yeah, you know, I had a lot of support from family and friends, you know, to start with to make it happen.
All right, that's good. So you came to the Philippines. So you guys shipped it over? Like, how did it get here?
Yeah, so we pulled the blades off and kind of disassembled it and put it on a trailer and hauled it out to Seattle, where I put it in a container and shipped it over, and then I, you know, left out of Seattle right after that.
Oh, okay. So what was the experience like, you know, where you shipped it off and obviously you flew to the Philippines? What was that transition like, you know, that you are in the country? You know, put this helicopter, did you have like a hangar waiting for you, etc.?
Well, when I first got over here, I didn't even know where I was gonna base it or put it, and I wasn't fully aware of everything that needed to be processed through, like to re-register it to the Philippines and, you know, get my licenses converted and stuff. So I spent some time, you know, researching, talking to people, trying to figure that out, and kind of determined, you know, Palawan was probably the best place to put it, based on limited range. But there was a number of projects, you know, that I could reach and support in the mountainous areas with that. But so I stayed, you know, lived in Manila. Someone provided me with a house, kind of a guest house in a little compound to stay in. And coming from Montana, where my nearest neighbor was my grandparents, which was a mile away, to living in Manila, which is, I don't know, a population of, you know, 15 to 20 million people, depending on who you ask. Quite a change in environment for me. And I guess, you know, you're surrounded by people, but for me, you know, I had at times kind of feelings of loneliness. Not that there wasn't, you know, people around, but there wasn't anyone that I could identify closely with. You know, yeah, I can communicate and talk with people, but, you know, there's just not very many commonalities there in background or anything. And so that was a little bit of a struggle, but, you know, I never never really made me think about wanting to go back. You know, I just find something to do and go do it, just to occupy my time.
Right. So how did you put it? How did you, when it arrived when the helicopter arrived in the Philippines? How were you able to assemble it and so on? Was there any experience with that or struggles?
Well, we got it in through customs, and the little compound I was staying in had a little courtyard, and it was big enough that I could put the helicopter together. And they actually had a little step and stuff there too, so we just had them bring the container in there and back up, and was able to unload everything right there in that little courtyard, and I put it together there. And I had gotten some contacts over at the airport, and found a place that I could keep it. So when I had it ready, I flew it from the courtyard over to the international airport, over to the hangar there.
Wow.
Where I kept it for a few months until I had it re-registered and was ready to leave.
So listening to your testimony so far, what I see coming out, and this is very much one of the reasons why I really wanted this story to share with you guys, is that Dwayne didn't have the whole layout of everything perfectly aligned, all the contact at every point. It's like the more I keep hearing your story, I see the same thing where I'm just gonna make this step. You're not sure what's gonna happen next, but let me go here for now. And then God did some miraculous things. You make another step, and then here he comes again and another step.
Yeah.
And for me personally, when I read like the Bible and I read the story of Abraham and some of these individuals, it's so amazing to see people in today's society who God is calling them on a journey, and they don't have all the details, but they're taking it one step at a time. And for me as a young person, I kind of like those experiences, because sometimes, you know, the Bible can seem so old and ancient, but when you have people in today's society experiencing that kind of faith, it really motivates me personally, and I hope it motivates you guys. I noticed so far you haven't mentioned anything about any relationship or whatnot. Did you have anyone back home, long distance relationship, or are you just completely single guy? Throw yourself out there.
Well, actually not too long before I came over, I had been dating a girl, but as I got serious about, you know, really earnestly following what God wanted me to do, it kind of, we were going in different directions with the end goals of our lives. And so, you know, I ended that relationship. And when I came over, I thought, you know what? Paul tells us if we can do it, to remain single, we can have 100% of our focus on God's work, and, you know, we don't have anything else or anyone else to worry about. So, you know, that's what I'm going to do. And so that was, you know, my purpose when I came over. But shortly after the helicopter arrived and I moved over to the airport, I got a call from someone. She said she was a nurse down in Palawan with the AFM project, that I was going to go down and support with the helicopter. And she was flying into Manila and wanted to meet me and see the helicopter. And so I said, yeah, sure, and told her, you know, where to meet me. And so her parents actually lived and worked in the Philippines too, just north of Manila, as missionaries in a graduate school there. But anyway, they'd come in to pick her up, so all three of them were there, and I showed them the helicopter and talked to them for a little bit. And then they invited me out to Ceylon, where they lived, you know, for the weekend. Right. And so I went out there and started getting to know that family, and for some reason, different things kept coming up for Wendy, the nurse there, that she was coming, you know, traveling back and forth a lot more than she had ever done before. So, you know, doing different things. She went to the States with her parents and then went to Thailand to speak at some little mission conference thing. So she was coming and going through Manila, and so we started getting to know each other, and my interest started to get perked that maybe there is someone that would have the same purposes and aim in life as I do.
Right.
And yeah, and the more, you know, we spent time together and got to know her, the more, you know, our end goals and focus in life were the same. And so yeah, God started guiding with that, and about 2 weeks before I had everything ready and left Manila and headed to Palawan with that helicopter, we had gotten to know each other enough that we wanted to, you know, pursue a relationship. And so then when I got down there to the mountains, I kept the helicopter in the mountains there for the first while, because that's the only, I didn't have any property or know anyone or anything.
No hug or nothing.
Anyway. So, you know, I kept it up there in that project in the mountains. And yeah, you know, after, I guess we knew each other for about 4 months. We dated for about 4 months, and then were engaged for about 4 months before we went back to the States and got married.
Wow. So 4 months, and then you made up. But as you mentioned, you guys clearly saw the motives and the purpose in the same direction. So you didn't have to worry much about, you know, the time frame of the dating period and the courting and the engagement, etc. And how long now you guys been married?
13 and a half years or so.
Wow. And you've been in the Philippines how many years?
About 14 and a half. So it was here about a year, and then we got married.
Nice. So your relationship flourished. You are now with this small helicopter up in the mountains. What was the missions like and the environment using that little helicopter to start out?
Well, we kept it up by a little clinic, which was just a bamboo shack, essentially. And I lived in kind of a bamboo shack connected with it on the outside. And then until we got married, Wendy, she lived in another little bamboo hut that was a little bit nicer. So after we got married, then, you know, of course, we lived together in that. But the clinic up there that's run by AFM basically services a huge area of the mountain. So people come in, you know, they'll be hiking for a day sometimes to get down there to request medical help. And usually it was like, well, find a way to, you know, haul the people down there on a stretcher or whatever, you know, so we can treat them. Or sometimes, you know, if they had time and thought they could do the hike, they would hike out and see if they could treat them. But now with the little helicopter, you know, when things like that came up, then we could fly out, you know, to the area, find a place to land, and you know, treat the patients or pick them up and haul them back to the clinic where they could be treated.
Okay.
So, you know, that started making life a lot easier in a lot of ways for helping these people out. And we made a bunch of strings that, you know, if a request came back in, we would give them one of those and say, okay, go clear a spot. It's got to be as wide as this string is, you know, in order for us to land and be able to. So yeah, it started, you know, opening up different areas. And, you know, the more further out we serviced, the more further out, the influence extended, and kind of helped expand the work into different areas there too.
Okay. Of all the experiences with that flying, is there any particular experience that stood out the most for you with those flights?
It was a big learning experience flying a kind of an underpowered helicopter in the mountains and stuff, and I learned how to use the air currents, to my advantage flying, getting around, because I almost had to have it in order to, climb over and clear some ridges and different things. But I guess there's not a lot that stand out specifically, but there were cases where I had to leave, you can't fly at night. I didn't have night vision goggles or anything, so you were limited by the daytime. There was one time we got a call, later in the afternoon, so I didn't take Wendy, but the other guy that was helping her, and we flew across the valley to stitch up someone's foot, and you could hike across there in like an hour, but then there was a river at the bottom that you had to cross that could be a little bit treacherous if especially if it had been raining and stuff. So, but he was stitching up his foot, and it's getting dusk, and I'm like, we can't wait much longer. And he's like, well, I'm almost finished. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go down to the helicopter and get it ready. And, I'm going to start the thing up when I have to go. And, if you can get down there, if not, I'm going to have to just leave you. So I ended up leaving him, and he ended up having to hike back, but he made it back okay. But it was Thanksgiving, like in November. So the missionaries were having kind of a special supper, and that was like what he'd been looking forward to for a long time. And now he's stuck over on the other side of the valley. But some of the other guys went down and, helped him get across the river, and they made it up. It was kind of a late Thanksgiving supper.
Yeah, exactly. So, people, I'm listening to your story. Individuals are going to be listening as well. What kept you going 14 years? That's a long time based on what we've heard. You're the kind of person that just steps one at a time, not knowing what the next move is going to be, how God's going to provide, but you're just going forward. Like, what kept you going all these years?
Well, as my faith has grown over the years, when I first got over here, I was considering, where to base the things in, where to base the helicopter, and it wasn't a lack of, needs, but a lack of the capability of the helicopter was kind of determined where I ended up putting it, and obviously God's guidance with that. But there was still other needs, in Luzon and Mindanao and other, a lot of especially the big islands have big mountainous areas that are the same thing. There's few places that you can even hope to put an airstrip. And so the work, among the tribal groups out there by the different missions struggles, just because of accessibility, basically. So I saw the need and wanted to, continue to be able to expand to meet those needs in the different areas. So as we got things developed, got open things up for property in the lowlands, and we were able to build a hangar and housing and air base down there and near Brooks Point. I had another helicopter pilot that joined us, actually from the Ukraine. And so I got him, trained in, so he was proficient, and left him to continue the flying and the work there. And then my wife and I moved up to North Luzon to try to start working on a second air base up there with the same idea, you know, to be able to establish mission coverage of the island of Luzon with aircraft.
Oh, that's good. So basically, the constant demand for help touched something in you that just set you off to work and pray and find resources and build these things. So individuals might be thinking, what's in it for you? Like, what are the benefits you're getting from this that makes you want to just keep going and going?
Well, namely, storing up treasure in heaven.
Amen.
As I had mentioned, you know, ultimately the only thing we're taking are our own souls and those of others we might have been instrumental in leading to the Lord. And I personally, I'm not you could say a people person. You know, I'm more of an introvert. So I've never felt myself to have any talent with, you know, Bible work or being a missionary, working directly with people. And yet, you know, God's given me abilities within, you know, aviation and mechanics and different things that, you know, He's given me the opportunity to put those to use in a way that can be, you know, directly related to ministering to others' needs and stuff. And so as what's in it for me is just the satisfaction and fulfillment of knowing I'm doing something that will make, you know, not only a temporal impact on people and helping them with their immediate needs, but also hopefully an eternal impact in the end.
Wow, wow. So if you were to share anything with anyone as we bring your testimony to a closure for now, individuals might be watching, they're from the US or whatever part of the world, they might have that desire as well where they're thinking about doing something for God, they feel the Lord's calling to ministry. What would you say to those individuals who they haven't stepped out yet, they're not sure, they might have commitments, family, etc., different challenges? What would you say or share with them to help them during that phase of venturing out to do what God asked them to do?
Well, you know, there'll be times, and there has been times with us where, you know, there's challenges, you know, and there's no question about that. And there's going to be in anything you do in life. And sometimes your faith might be tried. You know, there's been, we call ourselves faith-based in that we don't carry any financial reserves, so we're dependent from month to month upon God, you know, Him moving on the hearts of donors. And, you know, there's been times where we have had, you know, very little donations come in, and I'm like, how are we going to make it through this month? But you know, within a few weeks, once all that's used up, God has provided from a channel that is not normally something that He uses. Right. So, you know, God has always been faithful to us, and although we might question and see, it's faith building, you know, to see as we step forward, not worrying or concerning about our own resources or, you know, what we have in hand, but trusting, you know, to God's omnipotent power to provide for us, that He will provide for us. And, you know, over the years, I have seen the fulfillment of God's promises, you know, that He will give us the desires of our heart. Partially because He changes the desires of our hearts. But also, like, before I was truly converted, you know, I thought it'd be neat. You know, my ultimate goal was to have my own airstrip with a hangar and, you know, airplanes and everything. And really, now I have 3 of them, but it's not for my own selfish ambitions. It's for the sake of ministering to others. Amen. And I can never see myself doing anything different in life, you know. Wow. And maybe God will call us to a different part of the world, but I can never go back and live, you know, a close normal life with a normal job. Just I would struggle if I ever had to do that again.
Right, so you're fully on board. Well, we want to thank you for coming and sharing your stories. Guys, if you were really blessed by this testimony coming from our director here at Philippines Adventist Medical Aviation Services, we invite you to leave your comments below. Share with us how you have been blessed. Share the video with family and friends that you think can benefit from these videos. And if you have any question, you can always comment it or reach over to us via email. If anyone would like to hear more of your amazing journey of faith, is there any way that they could reach out to you via contact or your website, etc.?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel with videos on it that kind of shows different things, you know, that have happened throughout the years, and our website, PAMASmission.org, it got our email and contact information on that as well if you want to contact directly. But we also try to put out, you know, share kind of an update newsletter every couple months, and some of our other pilots and stuff do too, and we try to put those on the website as well.
Oh, okay, very good. So we'll share those on the comment section below. I mean, on the video itself, so people can have access to that. So once again, Dwayne, thank you very much for coming. It was a blessing having you. I'm sure these individuals will appreciate and love your story. So thank you guys for watching. Mabuhay from the Philippines, and we're definitely gonna invite him back for more videos, so stay tuned to the channel and you will see more content on Dwayne's amazing journey of faith, leaving everything, and now he has found himself 14 years cemented, and he doesn't even feel like he could ever go back to a regular life. God bless. Mabuhay from the Philippines. Thank you for watching.